It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for another episode of the Life in the Movies podcast with Ryan and Jacob. I am one of your co-hosts. My name is Ryan Can. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This week, Jacob and I are going to be discussing Turning Red, the new Pixar movie, and the Daredevil series, along with all the Netflix Marvel stuff coming over to Disney Plus. And somehow this is a controversial thing. Well, we'll talk about that when we get there. But first, I got to introduce my co-host. He is the main man, but most importantly, he's a kind man. He's Jacob Martin. Jacob, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty good, Ryan. I'm a little congested today. I had a little bit of stuffiness in my nose because of all the sinus stuff going on. I've had highs and lows in temperature. Like it's been the 60s today, but the last 2 days, we're recording this on a Monday night. This past weekend, it was really cold and windy. It was like in the 20s and 30s. So they go from that to the 60s today. It's just really crazy. And so I'm a little stuffy today, but I'm well enough to make it through this podcast. So if I do any sneezing or coughing or anything like that, I'm just getting over some sinus pressure. I don't have COVID or anything. I've had that, which I didn't like, but yeah, I'll definitely take just a normal sneeze and cold better than COVID any day of the week.
I'm grateful enough to have not had a single strain of COVID. I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones, but I've had two separate bouts of allergies. So it's like when it comes to COVID, I'm Neo from the Matrix. And when it comes to allergies, I'm like the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, just getting one after the other after the other. It's crazy. But before we do jump in though, I got some news, and I didn't tell Jacob about this before, but this has nothing to do with movies. This is actually, if many of you know me, you all know that I am a big fan of pro wrestling. And over the past week, or past couple of days more specifically, it's been pretty bad news. One of the biggest wrestlers of like the mid to late 90s, his name is Scott Hall. He recently actually, like literally minutes before we started recording, he actually passed away. He was on life support after complications after hip replacement surgery, which then caused him to have 3 separate heart attacks, and that was just it. And I know a lot of you watching are probably not wrestling fans, and I won't take this any longer than I have to, but as a wrestling fan, just hearing about most wrestlers die, just it makes me very, very sad, especially Scott Hall, because he was one of the more important ones of like 96, 97, and 98. I could go on for days and days about his career, but honestly, his life could be made into a sports like biopic type, like say something The Wrestler, because he was unfortunately gripped in the battles or throes, if you will, of addiction. And it pretty much controlled him up until, say, 2011, 2012, where he finally got definitively clean and sober thanks to Diamond Dallas Page, another pro wrestler who's actually in the upcoming Netflix series Guardians of Justice, I believe it's what it's called. But I call him Saint DDP because he is consistently helping people through his DDP yoga program, and some of the stories that he's been able to create and how he's been able to help people has just been phenomenal. And so just want to give a big shout out and a rest in peace to Scott Hall. I know this is a movie podcast, so I don't want to take this any longer than I have to, but it's something that's been on my mind and just really, really sucks because he was, despite his nickname being the bad guy, he was one of the good guys.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the wrestling scene, but it is always sad hearing a renowned figure that you know personally pass away. So deep condolences to uh, him and his family. And it sounds like he had an interesting story. So I'd be curious to see what would happen if he got his own movie or limited series.
Yeah, I won't go too deep into his story because we'd be here all day, but Before he got into wrestling, he was working as a bouncer while he was training. And while he was working as a bouncer, he actually accidentally killing a person, a rowdy bar patron. Like he was in the right, like he didn't start it, but it was something that clearly ate away and haunted him for the rest of his life. And they in WWE, who he's probably most familiar with, they made a DVD in 2015 called "Living on the Razor's Edge" because his nickname was the name for his finishing move was the Razor's Edge. And so living on the Razor's Edge, Scott Hall. And he actually went to the nightclub where it happened, and it was surreal. It really was. That's why I guess that's what, among other reasons, it's why I love wrestling so much. And when people look down, like, it's fake, right? Like, yes, I know these people aren't actually hurting each other. People do get hurt in the ring. A wrestler at the time of this recording, his name is Big E. He actually broke his neck recently on an Aaron suplex. He's gonna be fine, but that's why I'm always like wrestling is yeah, it's like these people aren't actually hurting each other. The outcomes are predetermined. But when done correctly, it's as real as any movie, as any TV show, as any book. I love certain wrestling storylines more than I love most movies, if you can believe that. And I like like Steve Austin versus Bret Hart from 1997. I could talk about it for days and days and days. But whenever a wrestler dies, I always feel a great pang of sadness. I especially feel bad for one of Scott's best friends, Kevin Nash, who I think some of you may know because he's actually been in quite a few movies recently. He was in the Magic Mike movies. He was recently in Dog, the Channing Tatum movie, in there for a brief cameo. And fun fact, I live in Port Orange, Florida, and he literally lives like 10 minutes away from my house. And I run into him sometimes, and he is one of the nicest people you could ever hope to meet. Which, considering that he's a movie star and was one of the biggest wrestlers of the 90s, it really does say something that he will give you the time of day. So, like I said, don't want to run into this wrestling thing too terribly long. Just wanted to give a big up to Scott Hall. He will be terribly, terribly missed.
I guess the segue into what you were saying, I know going into the movie side, I know a lot of us, especially as Marvel fans, we just lost a great character actor with William Hurt, who
Mm-hmm.
who played General Ross in several MCU films like The Incredible Hulk and Captain America: Civil War. I feel like we should say rest in peace to William Hurt as well, who definitely gave some incredible performance in the MCU and outside of the MCU. He will be greatly missed as well.
Absolutely. I remember watching The Incredible Hulk in theaters, and one of my favorite parts of the movie being General Ross, just because of how over the top he was. Like, where is he? And get around
Yeah.
behind him! And like, get him all of it! And like, dude, calm down. Like, I know you're tackling a green rage monster, but you don't have to yell.
Yeah, like it's no secret that The Incredible Hulk is not one of my all-time favorite MCU movies or anything, but William Hurt was probably the best part of that movie because of how much he embodied his character, and I loved the clash that he had with Bruce Banner throughout the course of that movie, and it was great seeing him in other MCU films like Captain America: Civil War and also Infinity War and Endgame, and I will greatly miss the guy because he played the character so well. And then other movies outside of the MCU too, like The Village. Say what you will about that movie, M. Night Shyamalan's direction, final twist, but I really liked his performance in that movie. The dark secrets his character had and what's actually going on within that village. A lot of it has to do with William Hurt's incredible performance within that movie.
Yeah, and there's another William Hurt movie that doesn't really get talked about a lot called Body Heat, which I actually watched a couple months back for the first time, and William Hurt is really good in that movie. It was directed by Lawrence Kasdan, who many of you may know as the screenwriter for two little movies called The Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark. You may have heard of it. He's a pretty big deal. and he did a great job directing that, and I recommend everybody check out Body Heat. And now that he has passed, it's made me want to check out things like broadcast news and stuff like that just a little bit more.
Because when he passed away, I did see some of the movies that people were talking about after he passed away. I'm like, I haven't seen some of these movies he's been in. You mentioned broadcast news, and then Kiss of the Spider Woman was the other one. I'm like, it's a bizarre title, but apparently he's really good in it.
Yeah, kind of sounds like one of those detective novels, like Kiss of the Spider Woman or something like that.
Yeah, but yeah, I'll greatly miss him.
Anyway, it's a dark week for the movie world and the wrestling world. But anyway, let's transition into some movie stuff. Jacob, what have you been watching lately? I see on your channel you've got some Del Toro stuff on there, and you actually got a review up for The Apartment, which is a movie that I have a lot of love for.
Yeah, I actually did watch The Apartment recently, continuing on with my series of Billy Wilder videos. And this was a movie I had never seen before. Like, before starting this project, I had seen quite a few of his movies, like Some Like It Hot and Sunset Boulevard and Double Indemnity were like some of the rewatches. But I had never seen The Apartment before. And I really liked it. I liked that it was a movie of two halves. You had the darker, cynical nature of the story with Jack Lemmon's character doing these crazy, devious schemes to climb up the corporate ladder and get ahead in life. And then you have the sweet-natured, endearing love story where he falls for Shirley MacLaine's character, the elevator operator. So even though there's a lot of intricate layers within the story between the two tones and the multiple characters, I really enjoyed the sweetness of the movie overall, and the performances were great. I love Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine's chemistry together, especially. And I enjoyed Fred McMurray as well as the boss of the insurance company who is having an affair with Shirley MacLaine's character. There were moments in the movie that caught me off guard. Like, there were some like darker stuff in the movie that I'm like, yeah, this came out of nowhere. Like, there's a character who nearly killed herself by a drug overdose. I'm like, did you do that in a 1960s movie? I'm like, well, he got away with it. That was kind of crazy, but it worked for the story and it made the ending all the more impactful. It was a movie that I don't think it's my personal favorite Billy Wilder movie. It wouldn't have been my pick for Best Picture as it won that year. If the Academy loved Alfred Hitchcock in the day, I'm sure Psycho would have been the Best Picture winner in my book, but The Apartment is still a really good movie, and it is definitely one of his essential films to check out.
Yeah, Billy Wilder was an expert of just building up things. It's like, just when you think things can't get any worse, there you go, and there you go, and there you go, and there you go. That's why I love Some Like It Hot so much. It's just like, just when you think Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis get out of a situation, another wrinkle gets added, and another one, and another one, and then Tony Curtis is the heir to the Shell Oil empire who can't feel love. And it just like, it's multi-level storytelling, and no one did it better than Billy Wilder. Thinking about that and just what you said, like, you had Alfred Hitchcock in his prime, and you had Billy Wilder arguably in his prime, in and around the same time. Like, think about that for 1 second. Just with the power of hindsight, we recognize them now as legends, but I wonder what people thought of guys like Wilder and Hitchcock back then. Think of like film Twitter existed back then. People like, Wilder's overrated. Ugh. Like, can you just imagine?
I mean, people are like that today with people like Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve. So I'm sure if film Twitter existed in the 50s and 60s, it'd probably be about the same discourse as we're seeing today. They probably complain, oh, why are they doing the cross-dressing story and Some Like It Hot? That is garbage. I don't want that pandering crap. But it's a funny comedy where they use that for comedic effect, and I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, and with the context, it's not like they did it on purpose. Or, I mean, they did do it on purpose, but they did it with a purpose. They were trying not to get killed by a gangster who loved his spats so much so that that was literally his name.
Yep. Yeah, and I love that because you get to the beginning of that movie and you think you're watching a different movie at first because you got the whole gangster element. It's set during Prohibition. Our main characters witness like this mob massacre, and they're on the run because they witnessed it. You're like, did I sign up for the wrong movie? And then they do the drag routine because they're trying to hide from the gangsters who are trying to kill them, and they're pretending to be girls to be part of this all girls band. And you're like, oh, that's the build up to the story. It's actually blended pretty brilliantly, I thought. And I don't. I think come to find out, Some Like It Hot was like the movie. It was one of the movies that helped bring down some of the censorship codes that was going on at that time, because I think that was a taboo subject matter back then. But I think Billy Wilder got away with it because it was a comedy, and people loved the movie so much that movies got less and less. Um, what was that? What was the word? They got less and less
Taboo.
picky on stuff. Less and less taboo, to where by the end of the '60s they got rid of the Hays Code, and then we got the modern rating system that we have today.
Yeah, censorship back then was just so weird, and it was so like it's so weirdly used. Like I remember like censors like took an axe to like things like the original Frankenstein, which by today's standards is just completely tame. Like it has some disturbing moments, let's not get that twisted. But by today's standards, if you were to compare it like to say Hereditary, for example, it's like Frankenstein's here and Hereditary is like way up here. But back then they were like, this needs to like be covered here and here and here. I remember there was one instance where in some prints when Dr. Frankenstein's like, it's alive, it's alive. Oh, how it feels to be God. That was censored because it would offend religious groups or
Yeah.
something like that, which is just crazy to think about today.
Yeah, that would cutting that line out would miss the point of his character and what he's trying to do. And it would just kind of undermine the whole message of the movie: is don't try to act like God, or else this will happen.
Well,
Uh,
censors don't give a crap about context.
yeah. Um, yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing some of those older movies and what they had to get around at the time, and compared to the movies we're getting nowadays, it's quite interesting seeing how things have changed over time. All right, so what else have I watched? You mentioned Guillermo del Toro. I will highlight Nightmare Alley, which was a movie that I just recently watched for the first time. I missed it in theaters because it was hard seeing Nightmare Alley on the big screen and finding time to check it out, especially when a little movie came out the exact same time called Spider-Man No Way Home, which kind of took away Guillermo del Toro's thunder because I was so excited to see that movie. But I finally saw the movie. You can check it out on HBO Max if you're curious. And I thought it was a pretty good movie. Now, I can't compare this to the other Nightmare Alley because this is a remake of a 1940s film. I've never seen it and I can't compare it. But Guillermo's movie is actually really good. I love the visuals and the cinematography of the film. I especially love the first hour of the movie, which is set at a carnival, and we see the inner workings of this carnival. We get to see like the magic acts and the hidden secrets that these characters have, and some of the shady dealing that these characters go through to get ahead in life. And we follow Bradley Cooper's character as he's trying to get ahead of everybody else because he wants to be this big psychic character. And Bradley Cooper is really good in this movie. I do love the cast. Kate Blanchett is like his big co-star, and she's like trying to one up him throughout the course of the movie. And I love that dynamic. You got like Rooney Mara's in this movie, Willem Dafoe, Toni Collette, so many remarkable people in this movie. I feel like The first hour was the best part of the movie because I loved the carnival setting so much. So that when the rest of the movie was out of the carnival, I didn't think it was as engaging, even though I still liked the story overall. I just wasn't as into the movie as I was the first hour of the movie where we had the amazing carnival visuals that Guillermo executed so well in the film. It's still a movie that I highly recommend, but it's definitely not one of my personal favorite Guillermo del Toro movies. There's good elements in there, but I think if we had stayed in the carnival, it'd probably be in my top 5 Guillermo movies.
Yeah, this is one that I actually didn't get to see, and it was actually released pretty wide, which I don't know what was going on when I didn't see it, but there it is. And I was a little shocked to find that this movie is actually nominated for Best Picture, if my memory serves me right,
Yeah, it did get nominated.
which is very weird. And I haven't seen it, and maybe when I do see it, my mind will be changed. But just sitting there thinking about it, I'm just like, there are at least 3 or 4 movies that I can think of that are more than worthy of deserving that spot. But no, hey, the Academy's gonna be the Academy, and what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have nominated it for Best Picture personally, but I'm glad the Academy's finally recognizing Guillermo as a great director. I mean, I think they're on his good side now after, I guess, because The Shape of Water won Best Picture several years ago, and I think that's a fantastic movie. So I guess now Guillermo and the Academy are like, hey, we're good buddies now. We'll try to nominate you as best we can if you keep making good movies. And so Nightmare Alley came out, and people are loving it, and like, hey, let's nominate you too. And I mean, I don't love the movie, but I'm glad that people do highly enjoy this movie. I think my experience with Nightmare Alley is kind of similar to what I have with Saving Private Ryan. Like, I love Saving Private Ryan, don't get me wrong, but I just feel like after the incredible opening on D-Day, the rest of the movie couldn't live up to the rest of the opening and how amazing that was. And I feel the same way with Nightmare Alley. The first hour was great, and the rest of the movie was just fine.
Yeah, well, that scene where Tom Hanks cries behind that rock still gets me every time.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not trying to discredit Saving Private Ryan. I'm just saying, like, the rest of the movie is just not as good as how amazing the opening was. Like how absolute shock of a sequence and realistic of a sequence of the D-Day sequence was, especially for that time in 1998 when Steven Spielberg was like revolutionizing, how to make a really good, gritty, realistic war film that is almost as real as the actual war itself. I think he did a great job with that movie. The rest of the movie's good, but it's not as great as what came before, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it was so good that the rest just kind of took a dip in quality just as a general rule.
Yeah, and I feel the same way with Nightmare Alley.
And so anyway, what else have you been watching?
All right, other stuff I've been watching. I did get to check out Scream 2 as well, and I thought that was a great sequel. I actually liked it better than the most recent Scream film, which came out in theaters. It's weird, I watched the original Scream and the new Scream, but I didn't. But I missed 2 through 4, so now I'm catching up on the other Scream movies, and I think Wes Craven was the right person to helm these movies. I felt like, with my big issue with the new Scream was that they were trying so hard to redo the original that it just fell short, in my opinion, and it didn't have
Um,
Wes Craven.
don't spoil it, please. I still have yet to see it.
No, I'm not spoiling it. Okay, thank you. I just feel like the new one was trying way too hard to recapture the original that it fell short. That's all I'll say there. I think with Scream 2, they greatly acknowledge that they're not trying to outdo the first. Like they even make fun of rules that, hey, we know this is an inferior sequel. We're going to go bigger. We're going to go gorier. We're just going to have a fun time with this sequel. And I think that's what I enjoyed about Scream 2. There's just so many cool sequences that I really enjoyed in this film. If you haven't seen Scream 2, I'm not going to dive into it because I don't want to ruin the experience. But there's some fun cameos in this film that I really liked. It was good seeing characters return like Sydney, Gail, Dewey, Randy. I enjoyed his character in this movie the most, I feel like. The twist in Scream 2, I think, is just as good as the twist in the first. I don't think it's as rewatchable as the original Scream, but I thought it was a highly entertaining sequel that definitely did its job.
You know, it's funny. I was when I was doing preparations for my first reaction to Scream, it was one of the first reviews that I did this year. I remember just having it stick in my head. Wes Craven was sick of doing slasher movies because he had done them throughout the 80s. While they were of mostly good quality, he was just like, I'm done. I'm just going to burn it all to the ground. And so Scream was kind of him crossing the Rubicon and burning the bridge behind him. What he didn't expect was Scream doing so well that studios being like, can you please rebuild the bridge? And so we ended up getting the Scream sequels. So inadvertently, Craven, by wanting to destroy slashers, ended up reviving them. So it's upside down.
No, what's crazy with Scream 2 was the film was greenlit just immediately after the first movie's success. It came out just a year after the original Scream. So they literally rushed the production of Scream 2. And then come to find out, like, this was, remember, this was early internet days. Somehow the script for Scream 2 got leaked online, which spoiled the twist of the movie. And so the writers had to rewrite Scream 2 while they were filming so they could have a surprising twist. And how the movie still turned out good is actually very surprising because horror sequels, normally when they have rush productions after the success of a previous film, they tend to not do well. Look at Child's Play 3, for instance. But Scream 2 actually was a really enjoyable sequel. I think you have to contribute to the success of Wes Craven, who, like you said, even though he wanted to burn the slasher to the ground, even though he didn't want to do another Scream movie originally, the fact that he still committed himself to making a good sequel just shows you how great of a director that he truly is, or was, since he just sadly recently passed away.
Yeah, may he rest in peace. We truly lost one of the greats. We truly did.
All right. And then I think I'm going to share some of the recent movies that I watched in theaters. I know, or streaming as well. We'll talk about Turning Red later in the video. But at my local dollar theater, I ended up checking out, finally, American Underdog, directed by the Irwin brothers. And that movie was actually really good, considering I'm not into sports movies, and the faith-based Christian movie genre is very hit and miss for me, depending on who's making it. But the Irwin brothers are becoming like my go-to filmmakers for faith-based content that's actually really, really good. Like, I thought I Can Only Imagine was fantastic. And I still believe, though I had quite a few issues with certain aspects of the storytelling, was still a solid movie as well. American Underdog, I'd probably put in between the two movies I've seen. I thought it was a really good movie. It doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything as far as sports movies go, but the story we got was still a really good one to witness. Zachary Levi, I love seeing a more dramatic turn from him because I'm used to seeing some more comedic works from him because he voiced Flynn Rider in Tangled, and he played Shazam, where he's very goofy in that role. It's great that he's actually, showing his range in this movie, even in a low-budget movie aimed for, like, sports fans and faith-based fans. I think he did a good job playing Kurt Warner, and I actually did enjoy the underdog story, and I especially got into the love story the most in this movie. Him and Kurt Warner and his wife, who is played in this film by Anna Paquin, who is so unrecognizable in this movie. Like I know her best as Rogue in some of the X-Men movies. So it's great seeing her in a more dramatic turn as well. The two actors had great chemistry. I enjoyed seeing the love story play out, the trials they went through, and them overcoming the odds and having a good, happy relationship at the end of the day. And the sports stuff I thought was done very well. The little nuggets of faith-based elements were done in a way to help build the characters instead of preaching to the audience, which is, I think, a more effective way of handling that side of things. I thought it was a really good movie.
Yeah, I thought it was just fantastic. For a faith-based movie, and the bar has been set so low nowadays. When you tell someone in the street like you like a faith-based movie, their mind immediately snaps to God's Not Dead, which is horrible, all of them. And something by the Kendrick brothers, who I'm sure are very nice people, but they've just never really been movies that I've personally enjoyed. But the Erwin brothers, they get it. They need to be given all of the faith-based stuff. I know, Jacob, we were DMing about it, and you brought up that they're starting their own company now. I can't remember the name of it.
I think it's called Kingdom Story, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds about right. But just give them all the faith-based stuff. Like, just give it all to them. They clearly know what they're doing. And I believe in the next month or so, there's another faith-based movie with Zachary Levi coming out called The Unbreakable Boy, which was in our preview that we did a couple weeks ago. And I swore to Jacob that there was a trailer, but for some reason it was not online. But you actually did see it attached to American
I saw the trailer when I saw American Underdog, even at this dollar theater. And I am actually hoping that it's a good movie. Like, if you saw our March preview episode, I did say I was a little weary hearing about the subject matter with the boy being autistic. And I'm like, okay, that tends to not get explored well in a lot of movies. They tend to botch that really bad. Look at The Predator, for instance. I think they're gonna do it well. I think they're gonna tell the story well. It looks like a very sweet story, and I'm excited to see another dramatic turn from Zachary Levi again. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be one of the year's best movies, but I think it'll be a crowd pleaser. And I think it'll be another enjoyable entry in this new wave of faith-based content. I don't think the Erwin brothers are directing it. I think they're producing it this time. But with their involvement, I think it's still going to be good.
As long as they have their hands in it, I'm fairly confident that it's going to be good. As long as no more content is made for the Brad Joneses of the world to rip apart, then I will be a very, very happy man.
Yep. And no more God's Not Dead movies. I've only seen the first one, and it was so bad.
They think that like atheists are like borderline vampires at this point, and it just I actually know quite a few atheists, and while we disagree on matters of religion, they are incredibly nice people. So I don't know what this director or what this studio head is getting at, but it paints Catholics and Christians and just all religious people in just this negative light, how like they're up here and atheists are like way down here. That's not the case. God taught us to love everyone and like with zero judgment. But this is not a religious podcast. This is a movie podcast. But
yeah, and then the dialogue in that movie was so bad. Like, there's like the evil atheist blogger who's trying to cancel the Duck Dynasty group, and then she gets cancer afterwards, and her response is, I have no time for cancer. Who comes up with this stuff?
Who does? Who does?
Oh
wow. Tommy Wiseau was looking at that and saying, yeah, that's awkward.
Oh, man, that was so bad. All right. So, Ryan, what have you been watching this past week?
Well, I've watched a couple things. First up, I watched Requiem for a Dream for a first time, which is currently on the channel now. If you would like to go check that out, my first reaction to that. And
Yeah, I saw your video of that the other
oh,
day.
oh my goodness, I was not prepared for that movie. And I had read a lot of reviews saying it's really good, but it's going to break you. And I was like, I'll judge for myself. I was not prepared. I can safely say I was not prepared. I will not I will not spoil anything here just in case anyone here has not seen it, but it's it's one of the most brutal movies you will ever see. It is drug culture at its darkest. Like 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 all four of the main characters, Ellen Burstyn, Jared Leto, Marlon Wayans, and Jennifer Connelly, are all just plane crashes. Their plane's about to crash into a mountainside, and you pray to God that they're going to get the nose up. But deep down, you know that that's just not going to happen. In terms of cinematography and score, it's one of the more unique movies I've ever seen. Uh, like I said in my review, it's incredibly well made, but I'm very comfortable if I never watch this movie again. It's one of those one and doners for me. I have a ton of respect for the craft, but I just have no interest to go back and watch it. It's kind of my general feeling on Aronofsky. I respect the craft. I just am not running to see his movies. It'd be like, say, what's on tonight? Mother. I liked that movie. Let's check that out. Oh boy, Mother is, whew, that is certainly something, all right. That's a whole nother episode for another time, I will say.
Yeah, I have not seen Requiem for a Dream. It sounds like it's definitely a brutal experience the way you've described it. And from what I know about the movie, I have seen some of Darren Aronofsky's other films, including Mother, which that was absolutely bonkers. And I don't even understand half of that movie.
This
I
is the old,
respect it, but it's
this is the
definitely not one of my favorites.
this is the Old Testament on drugs.
Yeah, I did get some of the symbolism, but what was that movie? I mean, I like some of his other movies, like Black Swan is really good. It's really trippy and dark, but I get what he was going for, and I really respect the craft of that movie. Same with The Wrestler, which are pretty similar to one another in a lot of ways if you look at the two and watch them back to back. But Aaron Aronofsky, he's a really good director that explores a lot of dark themes. But like you said, he's not one of my absolute favorites because I think he gets too weird and too artsy. And they're movies that I definitely don't want to revisit because of how messed up a lot of them are.
Yeah, Aronofsky is kind of like Nolan or Tarantino. You don't go into it for a specific subject. You go into it because it's Nolan, it's Tarantino, and if you're an Aronofsky fan, you're going to it because it's Aronofsky, and something weird is going to happen. Aronofsky was A24 before A24 was a thing.
I guess he's kind of like the modern equivalent, I feel like, to what Stanley Kubrick did, because he made a lot of experimental movies, which some of which can be very brutal to watch, like A Clockwork Orange, for instance, which had so many dark subject matter, and it's one where even though I respect it, I'm not watching that again. There's some like dark stuff in that movie that messed me up when I watched it. I'm like, I'm not sure if I like this movie that well or not.
Yeah,
But
I have a ton of respect for A Clockwork Orange. I remember watching it for the AFI project, and like at a certain point, I was like, "Wait, where did the Droogs go? Like, what's happening?" And just, oh boy, talk about like like Kubrick put his all into that, but at the same time, it's like, what is happening for like 2 hours? Is like they're sitting in this bar, and there's like erotic like art everywhere. They're drinking drug laced milk, and Alex DeLarge is like sitting like this, and he's like ultra violence. You know, like you're listening to Beethoven. How am I supposed to take you seriously? Like, come on.
Nah, the scene that messed me up deals with a lot of heavy material, but there's like an assault scene in the film, and it's
Oh,
very
oh.
graphic in the way it's presented. It really made me uncomfortable watching it. And he's doing all this while singing the most innocent song you can think of, Gene Kelly singing in the rain. Why?
You
Why did he sing that song?
you can't not think of Singing in the Rain now without thinking of A Clockwork Orange, can you?
Well, on the flip side, though, the movie ends and they play the Gene Kelly version, so I think that kind of softened the experience. I'm like, okay, I can think of Gene Kelly again.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about weird movies. I mean, I've been thinking for a while of doing like a Kubrick project. Like his filmography is kind of small. He only made like 9 or 10 movies. That's a rough estimate. I'd have to look it up. But I've already covered 2001, and I love that movie. I've already talked about A Clockwork Orange. Have a ton of respect for that. But I've always wanted to see Eyes Wide Shut. Haven't seen Full Metal Jacket in a good long time, but I remember liking it. So I think that would be fun for me to do one day.
Yeah, like I've had people have mentioned Kubrick a lot when I've done a lot of director projects on my channel, and I've seen a good chunk of Kubrick movies now, some of which I've previously reviewed on my channel, like A Clockwork Orange, 2001. I've done The Shining, and I think Doctor Strangelove. I think I've done those four, and those are like his four essentials. And to be honest, Kubrick is a little overrated in my opinion. Like I respect his craft, but I just don't resonate with his movies that much. Like 2001, I think is visually amazing, but I find it a little overlong and pretentious. Clockwork Orange, like I've already said, it's a movie I respect the craft, but it left me grossly uncomfortable. Doctor Strangelove, I don't get it all. I think it's so overrated, and I think the comedy and satire is very dry for me. I love The Shining, though. That's like the one exception. I think he did an amazing job with that movie, like taking Stephen King's story, doing his own stamp on it. There's things in it that don't make sense, but I think that's the point. And I have to respect what he brought to it. And there's aspects that leave you thinking and guessing. And I like what he did with that. So I haven't seen the other movies you mentioned. I've never seen Full Metal Jacket, and I haven't seen Eyes Wide Shut. I guess at the bottom line, if I'm definitely open to doing a project on Kubrick, but I really don't want to revisit The Clockwork Orange again. I think that's going to be the thing that'll hold me back.
Well, if you do it, collab it with me. I'll help you through.
Yeah, I'll remember that.
Yeah,
I helped you out on Prisoners, so you'll return the favor.
one of my favorite villains of all time is Hal 9000. I thought that was handled incredibly well. Hal's death is one of those things where Hal 9000 is undoubtedly just one of the most cold and unfeeling villains in movie history. But Hal's death is one of the most haunting things you will ever see. Just when you just hear him and in his monotone voice is like, Dave, you should take a stress pill and think things over. And just like begging Dave not to do it. And then as Dave is pulling out like his memory and he's like, Dave, it hurts. My memory's going. And I'm like, am I feeling sympathy for this thing? What is going on? And then it reverts back to his original programming in the deep voice, and he's like, I am a HAL 9000. And it's like, what is going on? What's happening? And then the cherry on top of the sundae is when Hal goes, I was taught to sing a song. Would you like to hear it? And Dave is like, sing it, Hal. Sing it. And then Hal just goes, Daisy, Daisy. And it was like, what? What in the world am I watching? It's just a trippy moment that it just like my dad and I quoted to each other all the time. I can look at him and be like, Daisy, and we're just laughing. It's just like out of respect, but also just of the absurdity of it.
Yeah, I don't fully get the point of that movie. I guess that's my main issue with it. I mean, I respect it, and HAL 9000 is a brutal villain. Like he'll like cut people's cords and leave them suffocating out to die in space, and leave people dead in their crypto sleep, hyper sleep, whatever you want to call it. So I didn't feel sympathy for him when he pulled the plug. It was weird how he killed the guy off though, the computer off and going, I'm like, you're taking the slowest time destroying this computer and having that weird voice going, I was like, move on, movie, move on. Go to that trippy light show the next scene later, which I don't get that either, but it's cool to watch.
Even though I have a lot of love and respect for 2001, I never fail to laugh at Dave's faces that he makes, where he's like, oh. I don't think I'm supposed to laugh, but I just do.
I feel like his eye twitches afterwards.
And you just like, you need to take a stress pill and think things over. Take Hal's advice. But anyway, let's
rambling on too much there. What else did you watch?
I watched Fresh on Hulu, which I also have a review up, and oh boy, I will not be spoiling it here.
I haven't watched it yet.
I do recommend it, but also be prepared, because it is one of those movies that takes a hard left and just goes straight down like Alice's rabbit hole. It's one of those types of movies. It's another one of those where I respect the craft, but I don't think I'll ever go back to rewatch it. Sebastian Stan just proves that he is a great actor, and even after he leaves the MCU, he's gonna do good and great things. Daisy Edgar-Jones was really good. She plays the main girl. I hope she gets cast in more stuff after this. Excuse me, because I thought that she was great. And it's best if you watch this movie knowing absolutely nothing. I was grateful enough to not read a single review for it, because you can't trust reviews nowadays with spoilers, because people will be like, oh, you can't review it without spoiling it, so here it is. It was like, what's the point of me even watching it then? You just ruined it for me. So I won't say anything more. All that I will say is that if you're even morbidly curious, check it out. And I think the best way I can describe it is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, American Psycho, with just a hint of the Silence of the Lambs, and just a dash of Ex Machina. That is Fresh.
That sounds like a trippy movie. I am intrigued. When we did the March preview, I think we just had the teaser trailer, and I was confused over the general direction of them. Like, is this a romance movie or a horror movie? Now it sounds like it's leaning toward the horror movie. I think that makes me more intrigued to check it out. So thank you, Ryan, for not spoiling it for me like Variety usually does. Like, I've muted them from my Twitter because people didn't like that Variety spoiled the end credits cameo at the end of the Eternals. I'm like, well, thank God I missed that, because I was still surprised. But no, you can't do that. You got to give people a chance to see the movie. You can't spoil this stuff weeks before everybody else has seen it.
Yeah, exactly. And then next up is I watched Unbreakable, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, which is also a review up on the channel. And I will maintain till my dying day that Unbreakable is M. Night Shyamalan's second best movie next to Sixth Sense. Sometimes it's my first, because I think that movie was way ahead of its time. We're still in the middle of a superhero movie boom period, and this movie would not be out of place today. It was well ahead of its time. Just by me saying Unbreakable, I'm sure probably a lot of you have seen it. So if you haven't seen it for a while, check it out again. It is better than you remember.
Yeah, it actually took me 2 viewings to actually appreciate Unbreakable. The first time I watched it, so bored by it. I didn't understand it at all. I watched it years later after I saw Split when they did that whole reveal with how the two movies are connected. And I watched it again before I saw Glass. And rewatching it again years later, I'm like, this movie's brilliant. It really is. I definitely agree with a lot of your points. It definitely was ahead of its time. And I'd say it's my second favorite M. Night film behind The Sixth Sense, from where I'm concerned. I think the only thing I have against Unbreakable, I'm not the biggest fan of water being its kryptonite. I just thought that was a stupid plot device. That's just me personally. And I wished, as much as I like the twist, I didn't like the text added. I just thought that was a lame cop out. I wish we had seen the execution of that more so than just a text revealing what happened to the characters at the end of the day. That's the only two things I have against the movie. Other than that, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I do respect it. I slightly disagree, though, just respectfully. I think the movie is pretty close to perfect, in my opinion. And then to wrap things up, I end up watching for a review Dead Poets Society, starring Robin Williams and a very, very young Ethan Hawke. Seriously, he is so young in that movie. It's really weird. But Dead Poets Society tells the story of a professor named John Keating who arrives at his alma mater and basically becomes the cool teacher. He takes a bunch of his students under his wing and he basically teaches them about poetry and how, yes, it is important to make money and live and try and be successful in your professional and personal lives. But poetry is something to be savored. And I love that message. I love the spirit of it. Robin Williams is in it. It's one of his best performances. I believe he won a Golden Globe for this, if my memory serves, which, if that is the case, then that was very well deserved. Young Ethan Hawke is in there. He's really, really good. Kurtwood Smith, a.k.a. Clarence from RoboCop. You will hate him. Kurtwood Smith is such a good actor that I consistently hate him in most of the movies that he's in, even though I think that he might just I think he's a good person in real life. He just is so good at being a villain. If any of you have ever seen RoboCop, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This movie is one of those movies that I hadn't seen for quite a bit, but after rewatching it in preparation for the review, I fell in love with it all over again. I remember watching it in high school, and I won't spoil what happens to a certain character named Neil Perry if any of you have never seen it, but it was one of my first exposures to what happens to him. I will leave it at that, but it is incredibly devastating. The actor who plays Neil Perry, I looked it up afterwards. He primarily does TV now. He was in House and Blue Bloods, which is all fine and good, but he should have been in more movies. And maybe that was a conscious choice to do TV, which that's fine, but he was awesome in Dead Poets Society, and it kind of makes me a little sad that he didn't do more. And of course, Ethan Hawke is still acting to this day. He went from criticizing comic book movies to being the main villain in Moon Knight, but we'll not talk about that. But Ethan Hawke's been great in a lot of things like Gattaca and the Before trilogy. So in many ways, Dead Poets Society predicted one of the big actors of today happening at that time. I can definitely see there's definitely a lot of most unorthodox and that kind of thing, but I thought it was handled very well. And like I said, it's one of those movies that I forgot how much I loved, and then I rewatched it, and I fell in love with it all over again. Though it is heavy at times, so if you have never seen it, be prepared. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I haven't seen Dead Poet Society since my sophomore year in high school, and I remember being immediately blown away by this movie, especially Robin Williams' performance. I think it was probably the first movie I saw the dramatic side of Robin Williams, because as a kid I saw him, as the genie in Aladdin, and then comedies like Flubber and RV. And now he goes from those movies, and of course this was one of his early roles, so it was quite jarring seeing him in a more dramatic role, but he was still really brilliant. And one of the scenes that always comes to mind when I think of this movie is at the end, going around spoilers as much as I can, where all the kids are jumping up on the desk going, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," defending Robin Williams at the end of the movie. I'm like, yes, do that. It was a
That's
great victory at the end of the movie.
such an awesome scene, and a little moment that I love is when he's teaching the class and they get to Shakespeare and they're about as excited about that as like cold toast, which is a bit weird, but there it is. And he's like, now I know a lot of you are not fans of Shakespeare, but I mean, have you ever considered doing it in the voice of like Marlon Brando? And he does it in Marlon Brando. He's like, "Oh, Titus, come hither," and things like that. And the funniest part is when he does a little bit of Macbeth as John Wayne. Is this a dagger I see before me? And I'm like, Robin Williams did such an underrated John Wayne impression. Like if you've seen any of his stand-ups, he does a great John Wayne. Search it out if you haven't. But Robin Williams was such a versatile actor. Like if he wanted to be funny, he could be funny. If he wanted to be deadly serious, like say something like 1 Hour Photo, directed by Mark Rylance or Mark Romanek, excuse me, then he was really good there. If he could straddle the line like something like Dead Poet Society, he could do that. My favorite performance of his, Good Will Hunting, showed that he could be incredibly funny, like the completely improvised scene where he's talking to Will and he's like, you know the thing I remember most about my wife? She fought it in her sleep. And they just completely just die on screen. And you're just like, wow, talk about breaking the ice. And then, of course, the infamous scene where he's like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And Will is like, I know, I know. And then he just keeps saying it over and over again until finally they just embrace. And it's so cathartic and it's so well done. I need to do a Good Will Hunting video now. I really, I've made it up in my head. I need to do it.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal movie. I agree. Robin Williams' best performance. And going back to Dead Poet Society, I'm not going to spoil the ending here, but I also remember that one scene in the back of my head. And it was, even though it's been, I don't know, quite a few years since I've seen the movie, I still remember it like it was yesterday, and it is hard stuff, especially for a movie of that kind, because you think, oh, the characters are going to be all right by the end of this because Robin Williams is a teacher. I'm like, nope, that's not the case. And I'll just end it there.
You know, I remember because I watched this around the same time as around the same grade as you. I was a junior, and we watched it in our film appreciation class. And because our classes were about 45 minutes long, we had to break it up into like 3 or 4 like serials or like 3 or 4 longer episodes, if you want to call it that. And when it got to that moment, I was just like, just everything that happened to be like, what's gonna happen now? And then when the thing happens, like I was not prepared physically, mentally, emotionally. It's just brutal, 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 brutal stuff. Like I said, if you haven't checked it out, please do.
Yeah, great movie.
All right, well, let's dive into the co-main events for the evening. Let's first talk about Turning Red. This is the new Pixar movie, and we actually discussed the decision to not have this on streaming, or not have this in theaters, excuse me, which we were both not fans of, and I have a feeling that we are not still fans of. I know certainly I'm not.
I would have loved to have seen this in theaters.
Now, I have an entire review of this on the channel if you would like to go check that out. So I'll turn it over to Jacob really quick. Jacob, what'd you think of Turning Red? I would love to hear what you have to say.
Okay, there is so much interesting discussions talking about Turning Red. It's a movie, I think, where you either love it or you really, really dislike it. I've seen so many different opinions on this movie, and I'm in the camp that I don't fully love the movie, but I really, 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 really like it. That's the best way to describe Turning Red. This is easily the weirdest movie I think Pixar's ever made. I love the experimentation. I love the idea, a girl turning into a panda when she gets too excited. There's also a lot of metaphors centered around that as it ties into girl puberty. Some aspects of that, I'll admit, made me a little uncomfortable because I'm a guy. But it didn't offend me. I thought it was done pretty well and respectfully, considering that's the subject matter we're dealing with. But man, this movie got very bonkers as it went along. Like the third act, if you had told me some of the stuff that was going to happen in this movie, I wouldn't have believed you. But I've seen the movie. It is so weird. You can tell the love for this movie, I guess, and I respect it. It's definitely not one of my favorites because I've seen some people say top 5 Pixar. I related to this movie so much, and I can respect that. I greatly respect if you really love this movie, but it's definitely nowhere near the ranks of your Toy Stories, Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Inside Out, Up. Some of my absolute favorite Pixar movies. It's a really enjoyable movie. I was laughing throughout a good chunk of the movie. I love the animation style. I like the anime influences, like whenever characters like ooh and ah over stuff, like their eyes just go barge open like this and they sparkle and stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's like some of the best of anime. I thought that was a really cool touch. And I liked like the 2000 setting and the boy band jokes and references, like the Four Town group, the fictional group in this movie. That was a lot of fun. I liked the creativity of the story, and I liked May, the character, and like her conflicts with like her mom, her friends, the culture around her. There's some good emotions tied around that. I do think this movie gets a little too much hate. I can get where some people are coming from, but the fact that some are like worst movie of the year and it sends bad messages to kids, I'm like, I wouldn't go that far. I think it's still an enjoyable movie that I think if you can get past some of the girl puberty stuff, if that's a little too uncomfortable for you, then maybe wait till the kids are a little older. But the movie itself is fine. I think it's an enjoyable movie, and I think it's good for what it is. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was not amazing and it was not awful. It was just fine for me. There was clearly a lot of effort put forth into there by director Domi Shi, and I commend her wholeheartedly. She put a lot of herself into that movie, which I greatly respect. And as far as the whole puberty thing, it was actually something that was done in a Studio Ghibli movie called Only Yesterday. Quick side story, Only Yesterday was supposed to come out in 1991, if my memory serves me right. It did not come out until like 2015 or 16 because there is a scene where the main character and her friend openly discuss their times of the month. And Disney thought, nope, we can't have that on our children's screens. And then they eventually released it. I said in my first reaction to it that I thought the decision to hold it back because of that reason was very childish. It is like, it's a thing that happens to pretty much every woman, so what's the problem? And that's my same stance with Turning Red. I mean, it's a part of life, so what are you gonna do? I thought it was handled very well, and my limited knowledge, I want to get that out there, limited knowledge. I'm not trying to be that guy. I'm just saying what I do know. I thought it was done well. I think the movie is flawed, but not because of that. I actually thought that that was handled well. I thought the third act of this movie was just completely ridiculous. It takes the mom, who I just did not like. I thought she was well too over the top. And just consider, if you will, the third act of this movie. May, who we learn can turn into a giant red panda at will, runs to the Sky Dome in Toronto to see Four Town, even though there are 5 of them. Figure out how that math works. She sees her friends, they embrace, the concert starts, and then her mom, who has rediscovered her panda, is like, May, where are you? And I'm like, did I just stumble into a Godzilla movie? What is happening here? Because if you've seen some of the old Godzilla or Gamera movies, those movies are wild. But that's another story for another time. And so the entire third act is the rest of the family trying to prepare this Red Moon ceremony while May is twerking at her mother, trying to get her into the sweet spot to where they could get her under the moon to break the spell, which I don't know what I was more offended at, that twerking happened in the movie or that twerking was not invented in 2002, it was invented in 2014. I am very sad that I know this, but there it is. And just, it's so much going on, so much chaos. I was actually live texting with Rachel because she did not like this. And so I was just like, I feel like I just took a trip to Colombia and there was a lot of snow falling. If you know, you know. And it legit felt like either a coke high or an acid trip. And what I will say about Turning Red is this. Like I said, there's a lot of quality here. The third act was just too wild for me. I thought its heart was in the right place. I just think in the grand scheme of things, I just couldn't come around to it. And that's not me trying to put the movie down or put anyone down who likes it. I'm sure there are a lot of people who do. And if that is the case, then more power to you. It just straight up just wasn't for me, and that's fine.
Yeah, I can definitely get that. I think I like the third act maybe a little more than you do. As bonkers as it was, that was when the movie hit its creative peak. And while some of it was a little cringe, like, did we really need a twerking panda in this movie? I mean, I still liked where it ended up. I liked where it ended between her and her mom. You brought up the fact that the mom was a little too much. I get what they were trying to do. Like, she's overprotective, yes, and she's very over the top at it, but she's doing it out of love, and she's doing it because, she's also, it's like with her own mother, because her mother was the same way to her when she was a kid. So you see that cycle between, mother and daughter, regardless of generation. And I think what they were trying to do with that, I thought, was handled as good of a way you can for a story like this. And while it definitely isn't my favorite Pixar movie, I still respect it. Domi Shi, I hope, makes more Pixar movies because she's done this and she did that really trippy short a few years ago, Bow, which I think premiered in front of The Incredibles 2. And that was one I remember seeing that in the theater. Like, I was not prepared on the trippiness of that short. Like, we have this alive dumpling that the human mother takes care of, and then when he gets too rebellious, she eats him. And I'm like, I just could not. I just remember just being in complete shock for probably a full minute. Like, was Pixar on drugs when they greenlit this?
I remember seeing it on the Thursday night, the Incredibles 2, the Thursday it premiered. And when the short was coming on, I'm like, oh, Pixar short, this always happens. And then just as it was going on, it was like this dumpling just comes alive. And I'm like, what? Who's directing this again? And then the dumpling just gets more and more alive to the point where the dumpling, like you said, it gets rebellious and it's like, and you're like, you little piece of crap. Like, how dare you talk to your mother? And I'm like, what the hell am I saying? And then the mother eats the dumpling and like a snap decision, it was like, how? I'm like, did you just do? Paranoia, everybody's coming to get me. And then the next scene, it smash cuts to her on her bed, like, Hunter S. Thompson looks at that and he's like, I don't know what to make of you.
I will say, though, the more I've rewatched the short, the more I get it. The more I respect what she was trying to do and trying to be like the story of like mother and son. And I don't know why you would do the dumpling to interpret that, but I get what she was doing. I respect it the more I revisit that short. But man, she definitely has a creative vision. And I like that she's willing to experiment and take Pixar in a different direction. And I'm curious what her career is going to be post Turning Red.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever she does next, and looking forward to be completely weirded out by what she does provide. Well, let's dig into the other main event for the evening. As you all know, Daredevil from Netflix, along with Iron Fist, Luke Cage, and Jessica Jones and The Defenders, are all coming to Disney Plus, literally on the day that this episode drops. And actually, guess a bit of a spoiler, Jacob and I are actually going to be doing a bit of a segment on the show where we're going to be reacting to every episode of Daredevil. And I think if it goes well, we want to move into the other series. I know I want to. Jacob, I hope that you feel the same way. But that's going to be coming because I've seen season 1 and 2. Jacob hasn't seen any of it. So it's going to be interesting to see what his reaction is to it, because Daredevil on Netflix is awesome. It's one of the few comic book TV shows outside of Arrow and The Flash that I deliberately went out of my way to watch. And so I was genuinely happy to hear that they were getting a home on Disney Plus, because it's a very tenuous connection to the MCU, but it still is a part of it. Like the Battle of New York is referenced, a bunch of other things are referenced. It's there, but it's a definite side story. But there are certain parents groups who are not fans of this decision, and they're like, you have ruined Disney's reputation forever by putting this show on your streaming service. And it just, really, Daredevil, that's the straw that breaks the camel's back. I don't know, Jacob, what do you think about this?
I saw that and I'm like, I'm not surprised. A lot of these parents groups get offended at everything. And where were they when I know Disney dropped a few, like actually they distributed The Beatles Get Back, which was this 3-part docuseries that Peter Jackson directed. It's really good if you haven't seen it. And that actually was interesting in the fact, Disney's known now for having a ban on smoking. And Peter Jackson had to convince Disney to keep the smoking uncensored in this old archive footage of the Beatles playing, because smoking was a prominent part of that time, and they wanted to keep it for historical context. And also, there was a little bit of swearing on the Beatles' part. Like, you actually, when you watch the Beatles Get Back, it's uncensored. There is some F-bombs that the Beatles say throughout the course of the 3 episodes. And normally Disney don't do that type of swearing in their stuff because they're more family friendly. But Peter Jackson convinced them to keep that uncensored because it's a part of their history. They don't want to censor anything they did in the past. They want to keep the jokey personality of the Beatles. Where were they when this happened? Like, were they like on the sideline? Like, oh, maybe because it's a part of history that we'll let this slide. But Daredevil, I'm not sure if I think it's TVMA, isn't that right?
That's
I think
correct.
That's part of the
This is not
the controversy, I guess, is because it's TVMA, which is like the equivalent to rated R. So I'm sure it's extremely violent. I think Disney had said that they're going to put parental controls on Disney Plus, so that if you're a parent and you have kids and maybe they're too young to watch these shows and you don't want them to get touch of it until they're older, you can just put the parental control in so they won't have access to it. That's as simple as that. I don't think any of these groups knew about that, or they don't want to know about it. They just like to complain. I don't know. It is so bizarre. I always roll my eyes when I see parents groups complain. I know years ago I would look at this website called Common Sense Media where they would react to different stuff, and it's the same thing. They get upset over everything, not just the group that runs it, but like the parents that comment on the website, and some of them they even get upset over like the silliest thing. Like I remember I read one parent was like, I refuse to let anyone under 17 watch the G-rated Mulan because it's too violent. I'm like, what? Where is this coming from?
It's weird. Some of those G-rated Disney movies are surprisingly scary. Like I remember
Yeah.
being more terrified, and maybe I was the right age for it, but more terrified at the stampede scene from The Lion King where Simba's eyes just go it is
Yeah.
like a dramatic like push in, and you're seeing is like the fear in his eyes. That gave me nightmares. Like I'm not gonna lie. And
Yeah, and
and so it's
a
ironic.
lot of G-rated movies then probably wouldn't be rated G today because parents have gotten so picky. And now I think every animated movie is at least rated PG now. And some of the PG-rated stuff back then were a lot more violent than the PG-rated movies we got today. It's very fascinating diving into this type of stuff because, G-rated movies back then, you had like The Lion King where a stampede comes in and Scar kills Mufasa, and he gets trampled to death. You got the Hunchback of Notre Dame, which has Frollo going around persecuting gypsies, killing Quasimodo's mom, and having a lustful attraction to Esmeralda, even though she's a gypsy. And you got so many other examples. I mean, going back, Pinocchio, where you had the Pleasure Island scene, the notorious Pleasure Island scene, which messed me up as a kid seeing these naughty boys turn into donkeys. I just remember seeing that shot of Lampwick, and he holds his hands up as his hands are turning into donkey hooves. And I'm just like, oh, this is so weird. And it's scaring me to death. I don't want to be this way.
Yeah, what else? You know what other movie is rated G? The OG Planet of the Apes, which
Oh,
which includes murder and also seeing a former human being turned into a living statue. But apparently that's approved for all ages. Like, what? So I don't take the rating system too seriously.
yeah.
It's more of a suggestion than a general rule. I remember working at my local movie theater, and especially when something like Logan was coming out, I had to ID everyone because, that's what you have to do. And most of them were like my age. And so it's not like they were taking little kids to see this. Is like they were people my age or older. So I guess my reaction to this is, yeah, they should use the parental controls that we all know as mom and dad. I never watched R-rated movies seriously until actually I started my review channel, because for a long time I just didn't. They just turned me away from it, and I discovered them just on my own. That's fine. I don't think these types of parents groups should be like, this is how it should be. It's like, no, like just let the parents handle it. I don't know. It's very,
Yeah,
very, very stupid.
yeah, it doesn't make sense at all. Just take them with a grain of salt and let the parents decide what they think is right for their kids.
Yeah, and I don't think any parents are letting their like young kids watching Daredevil. I just think that's just straight up not going to happen. But that's just me. But any of you are going to be checking out Daredevil on Disney Plus and all the other shows, leave it in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, when Daredevil does drop, we are going to be reacting to all of those episodes and getting into the other Marvel stuff, which is going to be fantastic to see Jacob's reaction, especially to season 1, episode 2. If you know, you know. But that's it. That's episode 11 in the books of Life in the Movies. Thank you all so much for watching. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me as always. Where can people find you?
Well, they can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can also subscribe to my 2 YouTube channels. My main YouTube channel, which is by my main name. I mainly do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, and other fun stuff along the way. Some of the videos I got coming on my main channel this week As we're recording this video, which is Monday night, I just have a ranking where I'm ranking all of the live action Batman movies from Batman 66 all the way to the new Batman starring Robert Pattinson. Other recent reviews I've had on my channel, I did a celebrating Disney review of the direct-to-video Disney sequel, Tarzan and Jane. Terrible sequel. I don't recommend it. I also recently covered the Peacemaker series that was on HBO Max for Superhero Saturdays. I've reviewed The Apartment is coming on my channel this week. We got a review for Nightmare Alley from Guillermo del Toro. I got a video on Scream 2, which I finally watched for the first time. Just some awesome content coming to the channel this week. And then on my second channel, it's my Story Time with Jacob channel. I almost lost my train of thought. Story Time with Jacob is where I do book reviews and read-alongs. I just finished a book written by a close friend of mine, Mike Zara, from the YouTube channel Did You See That? He wrote Suicide Rumor. At the time of recording, I just finished it today. Really good book. You can pick it up. I think I got it for $6 on Amazon. It's a really good book. I'll admit there are some grammatical errors in this book, and if that's the only negative I have with it, then it's a really good book. I actually do like the story. Be warned, there's dark subject matter. I mean, the subject matter is in the title, Suicide Rumor, so we're going that dark with the story, but it tells the story well, and I did follow the characters. I liked the story. I enjoyed where it went, and it definitely left me thinking at the end of the day. So really good book. I think the next book I'll tackle, since the last 2 books have been very dark. I've done To Kill a Mockingbird, which dealt with discussions of rape and racism, and now we got Suicide Rumor, which covers bullying and suicide. Very dark subject. So I'm going light next. I'm going back to my childhood with the Chronicles of Narnia. I love that series, so I'll be starting The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe next. So be on the lookout for some good content on both of my channels.
I love me some C.S. Lewis. He is awesome. As a matter of fact, my next book up that I'm going to be reading is The Screwtape Letters, which I have never read, but has come highly recommended. I read his other book, Mere Christianity, which I thought was great. And so I'm anxious to dive into that when I'm done with my other one. But
yeah, I haven't read any of his Christian, like his adult Christian nonfiction stuff. I just know him for Chronicles of Narnia, and I've heard his other books are great.
Yeah, but definitely check out Jacob on social media and his other channels. They will be in the description of this video. But as for this channel, if you liked what you've seen here, please do hit that subscribe button and click the bell to allow notifications. That way, whenever a new video drops, you'll be the first to know about it. Coming up on the channel, on Monday, I dropped another Twilight Zone vlog for the episode Nick of Time, aka the debut of William Shatner in the Twilight Zone. He would return for Nightmare on 20,000 Feet, but this is his debut in the series. And then coming up, I will be having reviews for X, the new A24 movie, and I believe Cheaper by the Dozen, the new Disney Plus movie. I'd have to check the calendar. It's either Cheaper by the Dozen or The Outfit. I'd have to check and see which one is more desirable. And then this coming Sunday will be my first reaction to Paul Verhoeven's Total Recall, which is a movie that I've been looking forward to watching for a very long time. Like, get your ass to Mars is like, it's gonna be a really great time. But thank you all so much for watching. That's Jacob Martin. My name is Ryan Cam. We will see you in the next one. Take care.